Despite their reputation for emotional detachment and ability to move on quickly from relationships, avoidants carry specific wounds that never heal and continue to cause them pain, years or even decades after the original experiences. These persistent hurts contradict their self-image as emotionally independent and unaffected by others' actions, creating internal torment that they rarely acknowledge or discuss. The pain they cannot release often stems from moments when their defensive strategies failed them, when they were seen through their emotional armor, or when they experienced genuine connection only to lose it through their own self-sabotage or others' abandonment. The irony of avoidant psychology is that while they successfully avoid most emotional pain through their defensive mechanisms, the wounds that do penetrate their armor become permanent psychological residents that resurface during quiet moments, trigger unexpected emotional responses, and influence their behavior in ways they don't consciously recognize. These lasting hurts often involve experiences where they allowed themselves to be vulnerable only to have that vulnerability used against them, or situations where they recognized what they'd lost only after it was too late to recover it. Understanding what avoidants can't let go of reveals the depth of their capacity for feeling beneath their composed exterior and explains many of their defensive behaviors as attempts to prevent experiencing similar pain again. These persistent wounds shape their approach to all future relationships and often drive their self-sabotage patterns as they unconsciously work to avoid recreating situations that might reopen old emotional injuries that never properly healed. The person who truly saw them and left. The wound that haunts avoidants most persistently is the memory of someone who genuinely saw through their defenses to their authentic self and loved what they found there, only to eventually leave or be driven away by the avoidant's own defensive behaviors. This person represents their greatest regret because they provided proof that authentic love was possible, while simultaneously demonstrating what the avoidant's defensive strategies cost them in terms of genuine connection and happiness. This person typically possessed the rare combination of patience, understanding, and emotional sophistication that allowed them to see past the avoidance walls without trying to forcibly break them down. They appreciated the avoidance complexity, respected their need for independence, and loved them without trying to change their fundamental nature. The avoidant felt genuinely understood and accepted in ways they had never experienced before or since. The lasting pain comes from the avoidant's recognition that they destroyed something precious through their own fear and inability to tolerate the vulnerability that authentic love required. They understand that this person didn't leave because they were inadequate or unlovable, but because the avoidant's defensive behaviors made the relationship impossible to sustain. This self-inflicted loss creates a unique form of regret that combines grief with self-blame. Years later, the avoidant finds themselves comparing every new person to this individual and invariably finding others lacking in understanding, patience, or emotional sophistication. They remember specific conversations, moments of connection, and experiences of feeling truly known that they've never been able to recreate with anyone else. These memories become both treasured and torturous, representing what they're capable of experiencing when they feel safe enough to be authentic. The pain is compounded by their knowledge that they were offered exactly what they needed for healing and growth, but were too afraid to fully receive it. They recognize that this person could have helped them develop greater emotional capacity and relationship skills if they had been brave enough to remain vulnerable and work through their fears instead of sabotaging the connection. This wound often becomes idealized over time, with the avoidant remembering the relationship as perfect and the person as irreplaceable. While this idealization may not reflect the complete reality of the relationship, it represents their recognition that they experienced something with this person that addressed their deepest psychological needs while respecting their defensive requirements. The moment they recognized their own capacity for love. Avoidants carry lasting pain from the moment they first recognized their own capacity for deep love and emotional attachment, particularly when this recognition came too late to save a relationship they had already damaged through their defensive behaviors. This moment of self-awareness often occurs after they've lost someone important and represents a devastating realization about their own emotional depth that contradicts their self-image as detached and independent. This recognition typically happens during the delayed emotional processing that characterizes avoidant psychology. Weeks, months, or even years after a relationship ends, they suddenly experience the full weight of their feelings for the person they lost. They realize that their apparent indifference was actually protective numbness, and that beneath their composed exterior, they were capable of profound love and attachment. The pain of this recognition is particularly acute because it comes with the understanding that their defensive strategies prevented them from experiencing and expressing this love while the relationship was still possible. They realized that they withheld their authentic feelings, not because they didn't have them, but because they were too afraid to acknowledge or share them. This self-awareness feels like discovering a crucial part of themselves, too late to matter. This delayed recognition often includes understanding specific moments during the relationship when they could have expressed their feelings, been more vulnerable, or made different choices that might have saved the connection. They replay these missed opportunities obsessively, imagining how things might have been different if they had been brave enough to show their authentic emotions instead of hiding behind their defenses. The wound deepens when they realize that their emotional capacity remains largely unchanged by this recognition. Despite understanding their ability to love deeply, they often find themselves repeating similar patterns in future relationships because the fear and defensive mechanisms that caused the original loss remain intact. This creates a cycle of self-awareness, followed by repeated self-sabotage that compounds their regret and frustration. The avoidant also struggles with the knowledge that their loved one may never have known the depth of their feelings. They carry unexpressed love and appreciation that they can never share with the person who deserved to hear it. This unexpressed emotion becomes a permanent burden that they carry in isolation, unable to find relief through communication or closure. The betrayal of their vulnerability, perhaps the most devastating wound that avoidants carry, involves times when they allowed themselves to be genuinely vulnerable, only to have that vulnerability betrayed, dismissed, or used against them. These experiences confirm their worst fears about emotional openness and create lasting trauma that reinforces their defensive strategies while simultaneously making them more necessary for psychological survival. This betrayal might involve sharing childhood trauma, expressing deep feelings, or revealing fears and insecurities only to have that information used in future arguments, shared with others without permission, or dismissed as manipulation or weakness. The pain of these betrayals is intensified by the rarity of avoidant vulnerability, making each incident feel like proof that emotional openness inevitably leads to harm. The lasting wound includes not just the specific betrayal, but the avoidant's recognition that they accurately predicted this outcome through their defensive instincts. Their protective mechanisms told them not to be vulnerable, and when they ignored these warnings and were subsequently hurt, it created a deep vindication of their defensive strategies that becomes nearly impossible to overcome in future relationships. These betrayals often come from people the avoidant trusted most, family members, close friends, or romantic partners who had earned their confidence through patience and understanding. The fact that even their most carefully chosen confidants eventually used their vulnerability against them creates lasting suspicion about anyone's ability to handle their authentic emotions safely. The wound is complicated by the avoidant's tendency to blame themselves for the betrayal. They believe they should have known better than to trust, should have maintained their defenses, should have recognized the signs that this person wasn't safe for their vulnerability. This self-blame compounds the original hurt and makes them even more reluctant to risk emotional openness in the future. Years later, these betrayals continue to influence every decision about emotional sharing and vulnerability. The avoidant unconsciously tests new people against these past experiences, looking for signs that they might similarly betray confidences or use emotional information as weapons during conflicts. This hypervigilance prevents them from fully trusting, even when current relationships show no signs of potential betrayal. The parent who never saw their worth. Many avoidants carry lifelong wounds from childhood experiences with parents who were unable or unwilling to see, appreciate, or validate their authentic selves. These early experiences of emotional invisibility or conditional love create lasting pain that affects every subsequent relationship and contributes to their adult difficulty with emotional expression and vulnerability. This wound often involves a parent who was physically present but emotionally unavailable, who provided material needs but withheld emotional connection, or who offered love only when the child met specific expectations or behavioral standards. The avoidant learned early that their authentic self was not enough to earn unconditional love and acceptance, creating core beliefs about their inherent unworthiness that persist into adulthood. The lasting pain includes the avoidant's ongoing hope for parental recognition and validation that may never come. Despite their adult success and achievements, they often continue to seek approval from parents who remain emotionally unavailable or critical. This unfulfilled need for parental validation affects their self-worth and their ability to believe that others might genuinely love and appreciate them. The wound also includes specific memories of times when they needed emotional support, comfort, or understanding, but received criticism, dismissal, or emotional neglect instead. These experiences taught them that emotional needs are burdens that drive people away, and that safety lies in self-sufficiency rather than interdependence. The avoidant often carries guilt about their inability to maintain close relationships with emotionally unavailable parents, feeling like they should be able to bridge emotional gaps or earn the love they never received. This guilt compounds their original wounds and creates ongoing internal conflict between their need for self-protection and their desire for family connection. These parental wounds continue to influence their adult relationships as they unconsciously seek partners who might provide the unconditional love and acceptance they never received from parents, while simultaneously fearing that romantic partners will similarly find them inadequate or unworthy of genuine affection and commitment. The perfect relationship they destroyed. Avoidants often carry profound regret about relationships that were genuinely healthy and compatible, but that they destroyed through their defensive behaviors, self-sabotage, or inability to tolerate the vulnerability that deep love required. These relationships represent their biggest what-if scenarios and continue to cause pain years later, as they recognize what they lost through their own actions. This perfect relationship typically involved someone who understood their psychology, respected their boundaries, and loved them without trying to change their fundamental nature. The relationship felt easy and natural while challenging them to grow without overwhelming pressure. They experienced genuine compatibility and authentic connection that addressed their deepest needs while honoring their defensive requirements. The lasting wound comes from their recognition that they had everything they claimed to want in a relationship but couldn't tolerate having it. Their fear of vulnerability, loss of independence, or commitment caused them to sabotage something beautiful that might never be replicated with anyone else. This self-destruction creates a unique form of regret that combines grief with self-blame and recognition of their own emotional limitations. Years later, they find themselves comparing every new relationship to this lost connection and invariably finding others lacking in understanding, compatibility, or emotional sophistication. They remember specific moments of connection, conversations, and experiences of feeling truly understood that they've been unable to recreate with subsequent partners. The pain is intensified by their knowledge that this person might have helped them heal their attachment wounds and develop greater emotional capacity if they had been brave enough to work through their fears instead of running away. They recognize that they chose familiar dysfunction over unfamiliar growth and lost their best opportunity for genuine healing and happiness. The dreams they abandoned for safety. Many avoidants carry lasting pain about dreams, goals, and authentic desires they abandoned in favor of emotional safety and independence. These sacrificed dreams often involved careers, relationships, or life paths that would have required vulnerability, interdependence, or emotional risk that felt too threatening to their defensive psychology. This wound includes recognition that their need for emotional safety prevented them from pursuing authentic passions that might have brought genuine fulfillment and meaning to their lives. They chose secure but unfulfilling paths over risky but potentially rewarding alternatives, trading their authentic desires for guaranteed emotional protection. The lasting pain involves understanding that they lived according to their fears, rather than their dreams, and that their defensive strategies, while protecting them from potential disappointment, also prevented them from experiencing the joy and satisfaction that comes from pursuing authentic goals and desires. Years later, they observe others living the kinds of lives they once wanted, but were too afraid to pursue. They see people taking emotional risks, building intimate relationships, pursuing creative careers, or following unconventional paths that the avoidant abandoned in favor of safe, but ultimately unsatisfying alternatives. The healing they rejected. Avoidants often carry regret about opportunities for healing and growth that they rejected out of fear, pride, or inability to tolerate the vulnerability that genuine healing requires. These missed opportunities for therapy, personal development, or relationship repair continue to haunt them as they recognize how different their lives might have been if they had been brave enough to do the work necessary for emotional growth. This wound includes specific moments when healing was offered through therapy, supportive relationships, or personal development opportunities that they rejected because the process felt too threatening to their defensive structure. They chose familiar dysfunction over unfamiliar growth and continue to suffer the consequences of that choice. The lasting pain involves recognition that they could have developed greater emotional capacity, healthier relationships, and more authentic self-expression if they had been willing to tolerate the temporary discomfort of genuine healing work. Instead, they chose to maintain their defensive patterns and continue suffering the isolation and limitation that these patterns create. The compound effect of unresolved pain. These various wounds that avoidants cannot release create compound effects that influence every aspect of their emotional lives and relationships. Each unhealed hurt reinforces their defensive strategies while simultaneously making those strategies more necessary for psychological survival. They become trapped in cycles where their attempts to avoid pain actually perpetuate the very suffering they're trying to escape. The lasting nature of these wounds also affects their capacity for future relationships and healing opportunities. They approach new connections through the lens of past hurts, unconsciously testing whether current situations might recreate previous pain. This hypervigilance often becomes self-fulfilling prophecy, as their defensive behaviors create the very rejection and abandonment they fear. Understanding what avoidants can't let go of reveals the depth of their emotional capacity and the profound cost of their defensive strategies. While they successfully avoid most immediate emotional pain, the wounds that do penetrate their armor become permanent residents that shape their behavior and worldview for years or decades. Recognition of these lasting hurts can provide compassion for their defensive behaviors while highlighting the importance of creating genuine safety for their healing and growth.